Hello, this is Cullen Brown, and welcome to the podcast where I review books for school. Today I'm going to be reviewing the book, This Is Your Brain on Music, by Daniel J Levitin. A little bit about Daniel J Levitin, according to encyclopedia.com, he was born in 1957 in San Francisco. He's an American psychologist, music theorist, audio engineerist, and a producer. All of these jobs that he was in shows up in this book and has a role in what he wrote in this book. The book genre he wrote is nonfiction and pure factual. It is a music book. So a little bit about the title. This Is Your Brain on Music is the title. So it's talking about how your brain takes in not only noise but music. And then the extra part of the title that is in the front cover says, "The Science of a Human Obsession, Endlessly Stimulating," which is a quote by Oliver Sacks. So he talks about why music is endlessly stimulating and why humans like music. So some of the characters in this book is bands that he mentions. He mentions the Beatles, and he mentions the band Rush, and some other stuff, some other jazz, a couple jazz bands too. And he also mentions as a character is just the human itself. The human is a main character in this book. And he is also a main character that he references to. There's a couple different settings he talks about. The main setting is in the brain. He talks about in the brain and in the ear. But he talks about what goes on in the brain and how certain things trigger different emotions in the brain and how certain sounds do that. And he also gives settings as references and examples. One example of this is he talks about a common thing that people say. It is, if a tree falls down in a forest and nobody is there to hear it, does it make a noise? So he uses a setting as an example, and he answers this question and he says, no, it does not make a noise. Because in order for a noise, or the definition of a noise, is waves going into the ear and sending a signal to the brain, and which is what we think of as a noise. But if there's no ears there, then what's really happening is it's dead silent in the forest, and there's just waves from what happened, waves in the air, but no noises. So that's an example of how he uses settings in the story. It's hard to do settings in nonfiction sometimes. Well, not really, actually. Okay, and then the conflict in this book is, why do certain sounds sound so bad to us humans, such as dogs barking and nails on a chalkboard? One example it talks about is how sounds go in the same area of our brain that detects pain and pleasure. So when we hear a bad sound, it can actually hurt us because it's in the same area of our brain that would activate if I got my finger burned, which is interesting. So that's what he talks about. And he says sounds that sound too high or sounds that don't go together are intervals that humans do not like. And I will talk about that a little bit later, what he says there in the themes. So the main themes of the book. The main theme is music sounds good based on the person's psychology and past. So basically, different cultures like different music for a reason, because not only the way their language works, but the way they've been listening to music their whole life. And different cultures use different scales in music. And there's a very distinct sound to Arab music, Indian music in India, and then Chinese, because they all use different scales and their history is different. But to other people, it might not sound as good. One example he brings in English, the English language, how it relates to music is when we ask a question, we raise the pitch at the end of our sentence, and then the other person knows it's a question. And this can relate to music if an English person hears a song and the notes go up pitch a little bit at the end of a phrase, we can get the same feeling of a question that maybe someone from China wouldn't get that feeling, because that's not how their language works. And talks about how music relates to language and many other different things in the book. Another main theme is music is based on math and science. And he says that all notes are just numbers from a wavelength, and humans like patterns and perfect splits. So what this means is we call waves as hertz. There's like 100 hertz, 200. We like it when you get a number of a hertz and you divide it by 2, when it's perfectly split, that sounds good to humans, and he explains why that works and stuff like that. And the notes we hear is basically just how fast the waves are, or how non-fast and slow the waves, or not slow, but how wide the waves are. And that's what we hear as low pitches. So he talks about the science and math too. So what I like and dislike about this book, first I'll talk about what I like. I love how he goes in depth with basically everything in this book, and talks about very like nerdy stuff, which is cool. And then my absolute favorite part of the book is when he talks about how we remember certain melodies in our heads and how we attach nostalgia to music. And I thought that part was really interesting, because nostalgia is cool, and I've always found it interesting how you can get nostalgic from listening to music. And he answers those questions and many other things too. And I like how I basically got exactly what the title of the book tells me. It says, My Brain on Music, and why humans are obsessed with it, and why I am obsessed with music. So it answers why that is. Not everybody's obsessed with music, so if you're not, then don't listen. Well, it's still an interesting book. But so my dislikes on this book, I don't have any dislikes, because I just couldn't find any dislikes, because it was a free book on music, so it's hard to really rip on that. Who I would recommend this to? Well, if you love music, you will 100% like this book. If you like science, you will probably like this book. Like my science teacher would probably like this. If you like to go in depth about stuff, then this is a good book, because it really goes in depth with all the different facts and stuff. And then finally, if you like having your mind blown by crazy facts, then this is a perfect book, because I've had my mind blown about 30 times when listening or reading this book. So this is Your Brain on Music, The Science of a Human Obsession, Endlessly Stimulating, by Daniel J Levitin. That is my book review for today. Thank you.